and begin. I'm going to bring up the chat here.
The game's another
All
GM.
right.
So like West Marches type thing, huh?
Yeah. All right. So
That's
we
cool.
are live again. Let's go ahead and start up the next episode. Welcome everyone to another episode of Notes from the Aleph. And Aleph is a high point from which all things are visible. And from our vantage point, we'll be looking at tabletop role-playing games, their design, and the theory behind those designs. And here our motto is to be fair, build up, and have fun. I'm your host, Griffin, joined by our editor, Theta, our local designer, Norman Rafferty, and our good friend and GM, RedRabbit. When it comes to tabletop role-playing games, I have 15 years of experience running, playing, and frequently fixing problematic rule sets at the table. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them. Rafferty, go.
Hello, I'm Rafferty, he, him. I have 30 years of experience being a tabletop game. I used to work for Knights of the Dinner Table, and now I work for Sanguine.
And Red.
I'm Red. I'm also he, him pronouns. I'm a professional game master for 3 years now. Lover of tabletop game systems. Lover of narrative and of mechanics. Trying to find the elusive middle ground between the two.
Right. So to start off this episode, so for a while I've been playing D&D for a long time, and after getting hang of the game early on, I became very enraptured with learning as much as I could to try to play better. I had to read every splat book for a feat that might help me out, or every build had to be planned from 1 to 20, and I was getting close to trying out a hulking hurler when I realized that if I threw a rock up high enough, I could probably argue for 1d4 fire damage on re-entry. Part of that probably came from watching or stumbling upon a build at the table that simply didn't keep up with the damage of the rest of the party, or would go down too easily, or just fail to have any way to really contribute to the game outside of the player earnestly doing their best to roleplay. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to play a game well, but to this day, if I need to break out a Pathfinder character, the first thing I'm going to do is hunt down someone's opinion guide as to what's good and what's bad about that class if I want to play. While a lot of discourse often frames this as a player issue, with people trying too hard, it's undoubtable the design of the games encourage this sort of behavior with terrible choices, trap builds, and often an unforgiving nature towards failure. So, discussing this today, who wants to kick that off?
It is the poor designer that blames the players. Because I will stand up and say that. It's like, we wouldn't be having this discussion about how to build an optimal character if someone hadn't invented the concepts of optimization and characterization.
But it's the popular forum poster who blames every other player for being too bad and should get good.
Well, no, it's well, this faded a little bit because I mean, like the rise of tryhardism is something I've documented because, like I said, I've been designing for 20 years, and we used to be a lot more concerned about what we were calling hardcore players. So I'd like to balance that between casual players and hardcore players. The casual player is the player who can still show up at the game and have a meaningful fun. They're often very performative. If you saw the last cast, they want to role play, they want to hang out with people, they want to engage the story, but they don't necessarily want to spend a lot of hours into optimizing their character or making sure meticulously writing all this. And I would contrast this to the hardcore, which were people who would show up at my game with 4 pages of handwritten biographies for their characters, complete with histories, likes, dislikes, inventory lists, all that sort of thing. Very hardcore people, and they would often also be incredibly invested in the rules to make sure their characters, were optimized. They read through and found this one thing that says that if you have this one spell and stack it with the stat minimum, you can then use molecular agitation to sort of part, so stuff like that. They was the hardcore people who put a lot of effort in the game, optimizing or not. And so when we were designing our games, we worked on that. Tryhardism is the rise of the computer game. What happened was, if you played an old school game like D&D, they were roguelike games. You were trying to see how far you could get before you die. There's no level matching in Dungeons and Dragons. Like the original D&D games, like AD&D, you just had levels. They could be numbers 1 through 11, 16, 22, what? You could dual class and start over again. I mean, the level was sort of a number and they put it on the modules, but the monsters were grouped in tiers of, with Roman numerals of 1 through 10. Like Lolth, the ultimate, or Demogorgon, the ultimate like deities are supposed to destroy you, are level 10. Because D&D couldn't use the word level enough. So you had these vague tiers, and you were also expected to pick your battles because you got experience points not just from killing things, but also from getting treasure. You also needed treasure because you didn't level up automatically. You had to spend money to level up. So your goal was to get treasure and maybe kill monsters. Monsters usually have the best treasure, but pick your battles. If you die, there's permadeath, so you could be out of it.
But later on, it becomes more about fighting the monsters, which AD&D, you start seeing monster experience. And if I recall right, I think they suggest kind of balancing encounters around experience, which kind of later evolves into the challenge rating, where they more explicitly do that, but give you like an easy into it rather than having you back calculate it all the time.
And for this, I'm blaming the computer games because people started playing like people forget that the JRPGs that showed up like Dragon Quest and your NES, became are more popular than Dungeons and Dragons and thus have influenced tabletop because people go play, not Genshin Impact. What's the new hotness?
What is the latest hotness?
Well, I'm so old. Okay.
Oh, no.
Tell us what's cool with the young
They go
kids.
play Final Fantasy
Persona?
14.
Persona 5.
Well, yeah, but they go play Final Fantasy 14 and they come to the gaming table. The concept of grinding wasn't a thing, but also the other thing that wasn't it was also these games were highly random. As we mentioned in some previous podcasts, that you just rolled. Maybe there's a 1% chance that you can set things on fire with your mind. You just rolled psionics. You have them now. Your character can do that, and this other guy over here has 9s and everything. Run with it. Have fun with it. You didn't have a lot of conscious choice about what you were allowed to do. Magic items just fell from the sky. If you wanted new spells, you didn't get to pick spells. What is this sicky stuff in D&D where when you level up, they let you pick your spell? Wizards had to find them in dungeons, and there was a random chance if you learned it at all. And if you didn't learn it, you didn't know it. You might spend your entire career without Magic Missile. So, there was you got randomness and you made the best of it. D&D 3rd edition gets rid of a lot of that, and modern games give players a lot of choice. But now we ran into the problem where Rise of the Tryhard, where suddenly now the games are obsessed with making sure that they're a good threat to the players. Like when you're at level 10, this monster has to have enough abilities that you can't just nerf it with one ability. You can't just diplomance your way out of it. It's got to have a whole suite of abilities to deal with that. And so they started re-examining what would happen at each level. Suddenly, instead of having vague tiers of monsters that might match your level, instead the levels were exactly matched. If you were a level 8 party, this is a level 8 challenge. And so then you had the problem where because you could make choices in your character and because some choices would have more efficacy than others, you started to get into the deadly trap builds. Where, because when it was random, you didn't have a trap build. If it was random and you rolled something that was crappy, you rolled something that was crappy, bad lottery, like it or lump it. Now, because you're making choices, we can now yell at the players for doing bad, wrong choices. And so now what you see these days in D&D, especially Pathfinders, the 3-fork, is the idea of build rot, where your character is falling behind because you're not buying the right abilities, and trap builds, where you take abilities that are considered to be of lesser effectiveness than other ones. And that builds a toxic environment at the table where, everyone knows we're a level 10 party, so we have to be able to defeat level 10 challenges. Your character can't defeat a level 10 challenge. That's your fault for building your character wrong. And so that's why I wanted to talk about, this is what Tryhard is. What can we do about it?
Right. And unless you have something read, I got a case study maybe for us to examine. A tale of two campaigns, if you would. So
I'm very curious.
Yeah, okay. So I'll go ahead and do some story time. So there's 2 campaigns I'm currently doing, both of them Pathfinder. One I'm running, one I'm just playing in. So the first one's Kingmaker, and it's an open world one. It's pretty fun, and usually, you'll wander around. You'll maybe come to a exploration encounter, which is at your CR, and beat it up. The players in that game are very well optimized. They can, in fact, dish out 200 damage in a single turn if they so desire, and they've been able to do so for probably the past 4 levels. They are not necessarily duly challenged by this game, which says have a single encounter most days at a time. The most difficulty they had was when I amped up a spellcaster, because of course I did. But then you take a look at another campaign, which is Strange Aeons, which is an Eldritch focused one, and it is very, very rough and has you fighting multiple encounters, which are above your capacity most of the time. We've had 2 characters' deaths, and most of the characters are not fully optimized, and they are having a rough go of it. So if these 2 parties switch places, they'd probably be having kind of a more fair experience, but the difficulty of what's presented to them definitely drastically changes whether or not it's necessary for them to optimize, and if it's even fun to. So,
Okay.
Go ahead.
No,
What are
I'm
your
just
thoughts?
I'm humming. My thoughts are a little bit. I think the first challenge for me is to wrap my head around the min-max mentality. Because I make famously underpowered characters that perform very poorly in the mechanical aspects of the game, because I make characters that I think are interesting, and I think flaws are interesting also. So right away, I'm playing a different game, I think, than a lot of people do when they approach Pathfinder 5th edition. So yeah, I think that the thing that always confused me a little bit about it, as someone who also enjoys, tabletop board games and video games, is and difficult ones too. Like, I like a good hard Soulsborne-y type experience. The thing about those is that, and tabletop board games also, is that they provide immutable rules. You're playing against an enemy that is trying to defeat you, and in that, another good example is competitive games, fighting games, shooting games, like online stuff. You're playing against an enemy that's everything they're doing is to defeat you. I never saw tabletop RPGs as working that way. The GM, I don't think in 99% of cases is trying to defeat the players. And then to me, the min-maxing idea feels like you're building a character that's trying to defeat the GM. But again, the GM can always move the goalposts. There's nothing stopping them from creating an encounter that would just be simply impossible for you to defeat. So the whole min-maxing concept comes across as kind of a weird exercise in vanity.
I do have to disagree. Respectfully disagree with that. When you say there's nothing stopping a GM, no, the number one thing that's stopping the GM is lack of skill. The only way a GM can move the goalposts for an encounter to make it easier or more difficult is if the GM knows what that means.
Okay.
Because I have gamed with GMs before who who grossly misunderstood the way the rules worked. One of my favorite encounters was I remember I was like a fighter. So okay, I'll stand back and let the monster come to me. Says, well, it moves within 15 feet of you and attacks. I said, but you said it was large. And they said, yeah, large. I said, large is horse size. And they looked at the rules. Oh no, this is actually huge.
Okay.
So and then look, and then the GM says, well, let's just play it out the way it's written. And then I get stomped in the dirt because it was like this was not the monster they said it was. Wait, I guess it was. We thought it was farther away. Right, and once again, it was now and of course this can build up a little toxicity here because I'm mad as the player because I was misinformed and the GM didn't quite understand what was going on. I agree with you where I don't think the GM wants to kill the party, but if you pick up a pre-written adventure and it's got the monsters in it, and then the GM runs the adventure as written, and the monsters kill the players. Most GMs are going to say, I'm sorry the encounter was so difficult. I just was doing what the book said to do.
So obviously the players are wrong, which is the wrong conclusion probably to reach.
I wouldn't say the players are wrong. I'm saying, like, when you ask, like, I'm getting back to what I call the fallacy of the good GM. Because, I don't think anyone would blame a GM for saying, guys, I just ran the adventure as it was written. It's a lot of work to run these games casual. Like, someone would blame them for that. But does that make them a bad GM because they weren't able to know that?
No, you're right.
I don't like that. I don't like that idea.
Yeah, we should proceed with this conversation assuming that you should be able to run these games without fudging them, adjusting them, or modifying them the way that they're
because ideally
presented.
that's what you're buying in the first place. You're buying someone doing all that work for you, and you're trusting that they did in such a way they won't kill you.
Well,
we mentioned Hordes of Dragon Queen already. First Adventure will kill everyone if you let it.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that because, I mean, like, I know the pre-written adventures can't be written with every party in mind, but this is why I want to challenge. Like, one reason when we had the rise of the Tryhard, I said, is because you have conscious choices. Back when they were random, I couldn't yell at you for rolling badly. That's not your fault. Now that you've chosen to build a character who has intelligence 8 but is also a wizard, now I can start asking questions. Why would you do that? But related to that is the entire idea of level matching. Has anyone here ever played the computer game Oblivion?
Ooh, I have.
Okay.
Morrowind.
Well, Skyrim speaks into this. Oh yeah, Morrowind. Okay, because you can see the evolution. Morrowind doesn't care about your feelings.
Morrowind really does not. That's why you break the game and you win it anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Morrowind doesn't care about your feelings. You can run down training 80 like cliff striders just flying after you. If you go to the wrong place, they'll just kill you. Okay, so Morrowind doesn't care about your feelings, and you can make whatever build you want. The game doesn't care. Go ahead and break it. So Morrowind is a great example of, like, do whatever the heck you want. Even if it ruins the game, we don't care. It's your game. And now, obviously, a lot of people must have thought Morrowind, you'll get people today who say Morrowind is their favorite, but computer games moved away from Morrowind, and then you had, like, an interim game like Oblivion. And Oblivion's the example. Skyrim still does this, but in Oblivion, you get these thieves. I always want to talk about these thieves that would show up and rob you. And the thieves are wearing, like, solid gold armor and armed with diamond weapons. Because I mean, I'm exaggerating, but they were like, they have, like, the elite equipment because they're level match. Because Oblivion matches everything to your level and looks at you and says, well, you're level 20. So obviously anyone who challenges you should have top tier gear and top tier skill. But you have to, like, stop and think from a story, from a narrative or storytelling point of view. You have more money than I could ever dream of. Why are you robbing me? I'm wearing nothing because I've sold everything because I want my encumbrance to be low because I don't know, buying reagents, whatever.
Now,
so you just use the guy and take his loot in the town and you get enough to, like, buy the next townhouse or whatever. It's like, why was this guy even robbing in the first place? He just had to sell his dagger and he would be set for life.
I guess he was doing it for thrills, but the fun part with Oblivion, for people who don't know, is that you level up your skills based upon how much you've used them, and when you hit a level up point, you get a multiplier based on how much you use them, and you get to increase them. So if you don't get the max every level, you start falling behind your at-level encounters, and additionally, if you didn't do it for the skills you were actually going to be useful, say if you spent like 10 hours building alchemy stuff and nothing into swords or magic, then when you get your at-level encounter, you get trashed and you fell into a trap and there's nothing you can do to reverse it, start your game over, and never ever sleep ever again.
Right, and you both mentioned and also we live in the future, so we live on the internet. So this isn't like the 80s where, little boy Rafferty is arguing with other people about, I think it should work like this. I think it should work like that. We have no work. Maybe we could write to Dragon Magazine and in 6 months they'll give us a response or not. Whereas now you can, like, let's go Google for the 11 Reddit forums that already talked about what the optimal build is. Hey, look, it's a program I can download.
Color-coded,
Yeah.
Yeah, there'll be a website you can just type in the numbers you want, and it'll go ahead and tell you. So now, like this is no longer it's not a subjective debate. People have optimized stuff, and so if you come to a table, one GM told me he had a player who would sit there and total up all the money they were getting to compare it to what the book says that monster drops are supposed to be at their tier to make sure they're getting enough treasure.
I've done
Don't play with that guy.
I've done
Don't
that
do
a
it.
lot, and not because I think I'm falling behind as player, but because as a GM I go, I don't trust you, module. You're not giving my players anything. You're
There you
having
go.
them fight beast with no treasure and continually siphoning their resources. When do they get money and
Right, well,
equipment?
Right, but that's what I'm getting at. Is like old, like you talk to old school, like when all this old school revival stuff, like that stuff didn't happen.
Yeah.
The monsters have random treasure types. You roll their treasure randomly. What shows up is what shows up.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the getting back to the Tryhard problem here is okay. So basically, it's been moved that so we're working under a couple assumptions here that the difficulty level of the threats that are presented to you in the game will increase as your career increases.
Mhm.
And then number two, you will have conscious choice in how your character is built. So how, in what arenas it will be good and bad at. When these two things are true, that's where we start having the problem of optimal builds and tryhards, because things will get harder and you have to choose things. And what really gets toxic here is the idea, like we just talked about performative play and people building their avatars and validating them. But now we're telling people the game is full of false choices. If you don't make the correct choices, you will not be having fun.
Now, here's a fun hypothetical example. You don't even need to have bad choices to end up with a bad choice. You could have a set of good choices. So we talked about having a character that focuses on a specific arena. So let's say that there's 3 arenas and you get 2 points a level. Well, you start good in one arena and bad in another one. And later on you go, well, I want to be mediocre at this other one. And because you put points into that one to be mediocre, you didn't put it into your specialty. And now you're mediocre in 2 things and bad in another one. And
Yeah,
so
I mean, I know.
even though there was no bad choices there, you fell behind because you didn't continue to specialize.
Oh yeah, like to use a
And
good
this is
example
what
on the
I'm
bad.
afraid of with Pathfinder 2.0, where it expects you to have these top numbers in order to meet their DCs.
Oh yeah. To use good examples and bad examples of this, like if you're playing like Vampire or World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness is even better. World of Darkness was that if you wanted to be sneaky, you could put 1 dot in stealth. Okay, and then if you have a dexterity of 2, the average dexterity, and 1 dot in stealth, you're rolling 3 dice. Each die has a 1 in 3 chance of hitting. This means you have a 95% chance of scoring 1 success on stealth. There, we all agree that you have average dexterity and the bare minimum of training.
And you will probably succeed when there's nothing in your way. It's good. I love it.
The bare minimum of sneaking. You can be expected to be reliable. Now you flip this around to, I've noticed that Pathfinder 2 and D&D 5 got away from this. You flip this around to like D&D or Pathfinder where you put 1 mark and move silently. And then you expect that to carry you your entire career. By the time you get to level 10, all of the monsters that you're facing have like spots plus 10 or spots plus 50. Or listen, sorry, because it'd be silently. And they will just crush you because it's a contest of rolls. If you didn't keep putting points in that, that skill would rot it away. So we have an example of something that's good and something's bad. Once again, that happened. Now, I'm glad to see that the games are fighting that. Like, for example, the modern versions of D&D and Pathfinder have your skills, if you're training them, automatically match your level. So they are fighting. But
is the point of a min-max build is like the pinnacle of that philosophy, that by maxing out the right set of abilities that matter the most, you make up for the deficit? Because the reason these games are designed as they are, the way that you were bringing it up, Griff, is that it's supposed to balance. You can be better at this if you're worse at this, or you could be mediocre across the board, which makes sense, right? But the idea with a min-maxer is you get to a certain point where your strong stat makes up for any weakness that's left in your character. You don't ever have to sneak because you can kill anything with your axe, right?
There's actually two bigger fallacies with this. I am pro min. Okay, the first problem is you're not, as a GM, your parties aren't one person.
Correct.
Your parties are 3, 4 to 6 people. Okay, so and each one of them, and then like you even tell them there's too many clerics. One of you will have to play a different class. You even force them to be diverse, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So what's going to happen is, like, so when the person builds their barbarian character, they don't have to buy, social skills or literacy skills or academic skills or lore skills. They came here to kill. If something shows up in the game that requires a different skill that they don't have, the barbarian steps down and the person who did buy that skill steps up. Yeah. So you can't yell at a player for min-maxing. And also, even if the barbarian wanted to buy that skill, they would never, ever be as good at it as the wizard and bard classes that get bonuses to buy this crap. So there's not even really any point in buying it, especially if you have level matching, because I'm never going to hit those same highs that these guys are going to hit.
Right, and it's fine to give up on that and have a party of specialists that rely on each other. This is why in your campaign that you're running for us, the Ironclaw one, like, comment, subscribe, come watch the video, we have Harmon, who is this incredible fighter who almost no one can take down, and that's perfectly fine. He can just do the fights. It's okay. We'll just go and do the other things. And it's fine.
When politics or planning or other things, he leans on us, and because it's a party. And that's the first issue I have with punishing players for min-maxing. It's like, not every character needs to buy every skill. Which is going to bring me to the other thing about buying skills. We just talked about performative. We're going to talk about Rafferty's favorite bugaboo to talk about, failing forward.
Oh, boy.
Okay. And this is where, if the plot requires something to succeed, it will automatically happen, regardless of whether you have the skills or abilities to deal with it or not. So, for example, if we have to sneak into the Tyrant Queen's army and then disguise ourselves as them, it doesn't matter what my number is in sneak or my number is in disguise. That number could be through the roof. That number could be 0. It doesn't matter, because if the plot required it to happen, then it will happen. So in that regard, those are, we can talk about like the crunchy skills, like the combat skills, and the soft skills, which are the role-playing type stuff. From that regard, everything that could fail forward is now a trap build. There's no point in buying sneak. If the adventure requires sneaking, we'll do it automatically. There's no point in buying disguise. If it requires that, we'll do that. There's no point in buying diplomacy. When we meet the Tyrant Queen's army, they hate us. When we meet the rebels, they like us. And nothing will change that. Therefore, any point spent on diplomacy was wasted trap build points. The only place I can actually lose and die is combat. Because the combats are written that you're supposed to win them. If I run to 0 hit points and fall down in the middle of a combat, then I'm out of the fight. Most some GMs might improvise that, but the mentality of failing forward is almost always on all of the stuff that isn't combat. It's not on the crunchy. And so that's why the players spend all of their effort optimizing all of their crunchy stuff and maximizing all of that stuff, because those are the numbers that are going to matter. If it's not going to matter, there's no point in putting it. And that's the thing I think people aren't talking about. When people say that minimaxers are bad, they call them power gamers or munchkins. All they care about is combat. All they ever do is discuss all these combat rules. And I just want to flip around saying, maybe they don't care about the other stuff because they know at some level that this is performative and that it just matters on good role playing or the script. So we don't have to care about those rules because they don't really matter.
Right, and I think I even mentioned this in the previous episode. If you come across a mystery and you brick wall because you can't solve it, you could just kind of go do something else. But with the whole party dies, the game's over, and so's the campaign probably, because
Even if the whole
you
party
can't
doesn't die.
recover off of that.
If I get dropped to 0 hit points, I am no longer allowed to participate in this combat that's going to take like 30 to 45 minutes. So I get nothing to do. And nothing to do is boring. Therefore, I want my combat numbers to be as high as possible because I don't want to be doing nothing. Doing nothing is boring. I mean,
Right.
I'm even discounting the idea of permadeath because, like, I guess you guys will raise it. But I mean, like, yeah, that's, you know, not succeeding. So, I mean, I don't want to, like, I don't like the idea of assuming that someone who's minimaxed. The reason why I wanted to bring up the tryhard is what's making the tryhard toxic. With the real dangerous thing is when the tryhard is yelling at other players for not being optimized.
Oh, right, you're not having fun the right way. Have fun my way so that I can have more fun.
Or the reason why we keep losing in all of these encounters is because your build is bad, my build is fine. And once again, we wouldn't be having that discussion if this was just random stuff. Like if you didn't have any choice. If you're playing Dungeon World, leveling up is extremely simple. So you can't really be yelling at people for bad characters in Dungeon World. You don't have that many choices.
Yeah, you're also missing though. It's partly a flex as well. Not to vilify min-maxers, I guess to vilify tryhards. But the thing is, there's definitely like a pride in knowing the trap options, knowing the way you build or the right choices to make. And so the fun for them is not only playing the game or building their character, but is also like sharing this information, which I think in a lot of cases can come off as toxic.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
I thought other people just assumed I was great. But no, you're right. I mean, that kind of behavior can be unwelcome at the table. So yeah, no, definitely. I'm taking the position that I mean, this is why I mentioned in the earlier the questions about performative play is I mean, I'm gonna like go back and say that since day one, our opinion has always been that someone who is minimaxing is someone who is spending, genuine and honest effort in understanding the game and learning how to play it. And when you punish people for minimaxing, you are telling them take a lower interest level in the game. And I really think that's also especially hypocritical when they keep coming out with new books. Like it's not just the player's handbook. There's the complete martial book, complete arcane book, divine, complete primal. New stuff keeps coming out all the time with new ways to mix and match and all this stuff.
How many 3.5 splat books were there?
Yeah.
Do you have a hard number on that?
I don't know, but to talk about the more positive aspects, it was noteworthy that Vampire worked very hard to make sure their game was performative. So even though they were still guilty of that creep a little bit, they had like clan source books that were full of social information of what clans were up to, and then city books like Chicago by Night, where they would describe the locations of the city and places to meet. And they were trying to make it feel more like it was a social environment, which worked well with the rules that they had for them. But when we get back to like gaming, a lot of D&D is you're a vagabond adventurer, and you can't choose to be a prince or the destined Campbellian hero to save the world, or part of a large extended family that also hangs around with you. These are not choices they present to you in the rules. The only thing you get is this one little avatar.
Yep, and then of course, even if there is an option, it's as you've said before, gaming nobility. I can choose noble as my background. What does it let you do? Nothing. Do you get any riches from it? No. Do you get any status? Also no.
You kind of do.
You are.
In a situation where nobility is important, sure, when you're surrounded by the 8 ropers and the 12 green slimes when you assert, but I'm the king of Carabas, they might eat you last. Maybe, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I guess
so. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to come across like I hate min-maxers or that I think they should be punished, because I agree with all of the things that you guys have said so far. I do think that, yeah, like probably min-maxing is just a one way to express an interest in the system and finding the limits of that system. And I think that, is what attracts people to a lot of these games. the fact that there is depth to the system makes them want to explore that depth and find the limits of it and test those limits. And I think that's good too. And I had something else to add. I think to your point though, I don't think they should be punished, but I think they should be placed in situations where they're not playing to their strengths. I mean, I think that's a blanket statement. I think that's true of every character.
Because it's interesting you say that, because it's okay. So there's an idea that GMs are supposed to challenge the player, and so every now and then you think, well, why don't I go ahead and take the players outside of their comfort zone, give them a challenge that they're not optimized to deal with. That will be a different kind of challenge, and that sounds great on paper. And I'm not saying it can't be done, but you're going to run into several problems. The first problem is what I like to call hammer theory. Hammer theory is based on the aphorism, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Which is whatever the player is best at, that's the correct way to solve every problem they ever meet. So if someone is playing the half-orc barbarian, the correct way to solve every problem is to scream at it and smash it. They will apply that to every situation. If you put them at like the gala ballroom and tell them, okay, there's no weapons allowed here and you can dress up and be nice, they will either be bored or they will perform their character as written and be obnoxious and do something stupid. What they won't do is fail upwards unless you just hand wave over it, which removed the challenge, didn't it? So
right,
being stupid is fun. I love being stupid. I do that naturally for some reason.
The other problem you'll run into is the once again, the diverse party. It's like, if we're gonna do a big diplomacy thing, I would, as the half-orc barbarian, I would turn to Griffin, who's probably playing the noble bard diplomat, because that sounds like Griffin. And I would say, okay,
diplomat halfling.
Yeah, this is your time to shine. I'm just gonna sit here and drink my finger bowl, and I'll be a good player and not be obnoxious about it. But I don't have the skills to defeat this. Normally, when you we're also getting to a huge situation of where a lot of these games use the D&D level-based mold, where they force you that if you're a barbarian or a fighter, you'll be buying physical skills. If you're a wizard or a cleric, you'll be buying magical skills. So putting me in a situation where to challenge my other abilities, I don't have any other abilities. This wasn't an option. I only level up once every 3 adventures, and when I do, sometimes it's just a stat boost or a feat.
Yeah.
That's not going to give me anything that would have dealt with this challenge. I couldn't have prepared for this even if I wanted to.
Yeah, you often are struggling with resources in the first place. You got 3 things at 1 point per level. What are you going to do? Be mediocre at 2 things and bad in another? So
no,
because
okay. So
yeah,
I would. So okay, I would say you don't want to place the party in a situation that is completely outside of their collective ken, right? Like, if you have a party and everybody is some sort of wilderness combatant, you wouldn't want to put them in a fancy dinner party, because that would be goofy, to your point. But we also spoke about how there is party diversity, right? You do want to give players the ability to shine, but a lot of those situations other players are going to be specifically bad at. Which, in your example, you said that, okay, so those players will just sit quietly with their hands folded and say, this is on you, it's not on me. But, I would say that goes back to the hammer and nail issue, right? Or really the thing that started this whole conversation, which is the idea that you want to challenge people, you want to take them out of their comfort zones. So maybe I'm misunderstanding, because I feel like that playing to one player's own character's strengths over another character's strengths would be exactly that. And I don't know if I see a problem with that.
Let me try to be positive, because I am being negative. So how can we deal with this? Well, one situation I think is, I think you should have a game that rewards people for working outside their comfort zones. At first I would use Iron Claw as an example. That's the one I wrote, where you can offer everyone a mission of go save these people or you don't burn their town. And when it's done, it's okay, well, you guys did a lot of digging of pits there, so I'm going to give all of you knack with digging. Or you get local knowledge of these people, so they like you now. Or they'll give you maybe you got boating is the big one. Or you went to Zhonggao, so you all learn local language Zhonggao. So there, I forced you in Ironclaw. You can reward people with specific abilities when they solve the adventure. You went and hung out with the foreigners. Here's their foreign language. You went to you spent all the time on a boat. Here's boating. Rather than like what another game would do, which is just give you experience points and maybe you'll buy boating, maybe you won't. So that and that way you encourage players to be diverse. Ironclaw lets them sell it back, where they can just say, "I don't want boating," but hey, we try.
It makes them think about it. It puts the choice in front of them. Do you want the easy way, which maybe you'll pick up skills that aren't in line with your min-maxed vision? Or do you want to apply everything towards that vision, which I think is good? Once again, don't think you should
why would they buy boating? People. Yeah, the boating adventure is over, and we all survive. So obviously, I don't need boating as a specialty.
Yeah, we'll never have a second set piece encounter like that, right?
Right, and I'm sure that and I always keep doing this Spectre because I think more players know this than I think GMs catch on. Because of Fail Forward, because I know that we'll eventually get to the adventure whether I know boating or not, because a GM won't kill me, just because I don't have the right skills while I'm on the boat. That would be boring. I know I don't have to buy this. It might make my life easier if I do, but I'll survive if I don't. And I'd much rather have more killing power, because that's when I know, because when the GM hits me for 28 points of damage, that's a number we can all see. Yeah. So players will pick up on this. So that's why that was the offer. I mean, another game I want to use as a good example of this is Wicked Ones, which is one that we're streaming on.
I want to give that example too, but go for it. I know what you're going to
go for. That has the unusual thing where you can have you have stats rated from 0 to 3, and you can have a 0 in a stat, so you totally suck at it.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the neat part about that,
take the lowest.
Right, you roll. But the neat part about that is if you use a 0 stat, 3 dangerous situations, it automatically levels up to level 1.
Right, it represents you trying something and going outside your comfort zone, and you actually become kind of okay at the end of the day, which is fun.
Right. Well, it feels it's a conscious reward for if I try to do things outside my comfort. Yeah, like you just said, if I try to do things outside my comfort, I'll level up, and that inspired me. I mean, because I'll be honest, the reason why I'm very bitter about this is because I've often been burned. I've often tried to build a character who is a Jill of all trades and can do anything, and the problem you run into is that if you try to diversify and build everything, you'll fail to try hard because you're not you won't be good enough. If you just have a smattering of stealth, a smattering of diplomacy, the level matching, you won't meet the challenges when they matter. Mm-hmm. And also, if the challenge mattered enough that failure was not an option, you just fail forward and go through it. So there wasn't any point in spending all of that. But then when you get to the combat, the GMs will drop you. They might not kill you, but they will drop you. And then you'll feel like, you'll feel like being diverse was just a waste of points because I'm not actually doing anything. I'm not getting anything done. And then the stuff that I actually, other things that I also want to do aren't getting done. So the game, but we're just talking about some positive examples of games that reward that kind of behavior of rewarding diversity. You have to go back to the game itself and ask, how can we make the game reward people for not minimax?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because I'm trying to struggle with I think so much of my perspective on this is the fact that I just don't play the games that way. When I make characters, I'm not interested in finding the upper limits of this stuff, and but I also don't break down when things don't go my way, because they're often just not going to. I mean, even for a min-maxed character, sooner or later things are not going to go your way. If you can't find joy in that, right? If you only find joy in the natural 20, then I don't know.
I'm also fond of saying that the problem you're not having is not a problem, which is, not every player is going to be like I said. Yeah. Some players will be like this. And also, definition of tryhardism is relative. Like I've run D&D for people who are like total neophytes, and they'll say, "Awesome, I want to throw fireballs," and I immediately have to tell them, "No, you can't throw fireballs. You have to play the game for 15 sessions to get to level 5 before you're allowed to throw fireballs. You'll throw one magic missile a day and like it." So in the old school gaming, it was just like they just played it until they got bored or died or actually leveled up. But in modern games, it's like if you want to be able to do a specific thing, like whirlwind attack and kill everybody next to you, or throw a fireball, you say, okay, this is where it happens. It happens at level 7 or level 9. Or even people just want to shapeshift. Like I want to turn into a unicorn. That's the kind of character I want. You can tell them, well, that doesn't happen until you get to level 11. And also not every druid can shapeshift into a unicorn. So you have to build this specific build. So this is a new thing that's happened in D&D where you'll tell people, sure, you can do that at level 11. And then and you'll have to do every single step correctly to get to level 11. That player goes, okay, I really want to turn into a unicorn. I'll play your game for 55 hours until I get there. And then they sit down and start leveling up and going there. By a certain definition, that player is a tryhard because that player is sitting there saying, I want to turn into a unicorn. I was told it doesn't happen until we get to here. Nothing matters until we get to where I want to be. And if we've decided that kind of behavior is toxic, then we have to step back and ask ourselves, what design choices did we make that gated this until it was that level? And God forbid you get to that level and discover that being a unicorn is underpowered.
Yep. Oh gosh, yeah. Imagine building a character from 1 to 20, and then suddenly halfway through the build you go, wait a second, this is all terrible and is underperforming the basic fighter who's just swinging his sword.
God,
Can you imagine?
Played a Pathfinder game with a sorcerer, with a summoner in.
Nope.
Okay.
I think we definitely tried a few builds, yes.
Yeah, so see, this is when we get to the problem. You're having another problem. The summoner is you're a shitty sorcerer, and you get a shitty companion that's always several levels behind everyone else.
And you can only choose to be one of those at a time.
Yeah, and in order to be able to be the shitty sorcerer, you have to kill your companion.
The funnier part is that if you run out of your sorcerer stuff, you can't immediately fall back on your pet. You have to choose the pet ahead of time, several minutes beforehand, and then not have access to anything.
Right. But long story short, it's like there are two kinds of groups: the groups who have never had a summoner, and the groups that their summoner sucks. So,
But now I wonder, because like when you're talking about the underleveled part of the thing, I guess it all comes down to the fun that the players are having. What I was gonna say is just to muddy the waters here a little bit further, because earlier we had been talking about simulation games, right, that represent a world that makes sense within its own relativity. We were talking about, like, in that context, if you have rules for rolling peasants, those peasants are going to be objectively worse than your pit fighter at stabbing things, right? Just by the nature of the reality that you crafted. So, obviously, in something like a Pathfinder, you're creating these power fantasy characters and classes, so obviously they should be fun to play at some level. But when you take the thing in its totality, like, maybe is it not okay that some of this stuff is underperforming compared to something else?
Only if your players don't mind being losers.
Right.
I guess being a loser, even if I'm building an optimized character.
Here's a better example that I'm going to use that hits home. Okay. Nobody wants to. The most disappointed player in the world is somebody who's playing a werewolf in World of Darkness. Because when they show up to play a werewolf in World of Darkness, the vampires have all the really cool lore and the mind control abilities, and they also have super strength and super speed. Yep. The mages have the ability to warp reality any way they want. What do the werewolves get? Combat ability. What do you not do in a World of Darkness game because it's only for grognard tryhard minimaxers?
Just combat.
So that's an example of like I am the poster child. I would love to play werewolf in the worst game ever. I said it. Because it would be like showing up and say, "Hi, I want to play Batman." Okay, our entire party is Superman, Wonder Woman. People make jokes about that. Imagine if you're at the gaming tabletop with a GM who is not good enough to write for Batman. But getting aside from there, I think what we want to be positive is I think what we need to do is we need to understand where the Tryhard comes from, and we need to allay the Tryhard's feelings. One good way is with good design. Dungeon World is a game that I don't want to damn it with faint praise by saying it's extremely simple, but you can't be a tryhard in a game that doesn't let you optimize. If we didn't give you the choices, we can't yell at you for not taking choices. So in some ways, a lot of these extremely accessible Powered by the Apocalypse games that are written at a much lower level of ability and rationality, those don't have that problem because you're a lot lower. I mean, the other thing I would suggest is what Griffin was already talking about, which is, or you need to write the game to where where players are allowed to buy it, to diversify, and diversify is rewarded. I'm going to be really on my high horse and say that if you have fail forward, then you don't need diversity, because if I can't do what I need to do, it will happen anyway. So we have to decide some sort of line there of what those actually mean.
Right, definitely. And I think when it comes to the design of these games, to help allay the fears, we really do have to put up forward that we aren't trying to be antagonistic to the players or trick them or deceive them, because they've already been discouraged by people around them to not investigate further.
Oh yeah, and actually the last thing I do want to warn about is you can't do auto leveling, because if you do auto leveling, your characters never get better. There was no point in me trying to become the best swordsman or the best killer if everyone I meet automatically rises to the solid gold armor and diamond weapons category. If everyone's numbers keep rising to meet my numbers, I never got any better. There have to be a couple times where I meet someone and I completely outclass them and destroy them, so I can feel good about being a high level. Otherwise,
it wouldn't be right.
Otherwise, you're really just frustrating the player, because I thought I was better and it turns out I wasn't.
Yeah, there's no. You need context for any of this stuff to have meaning. So if you're not providing that contrast, then it has no meaning.
Yeah, I mean, I have another theme related of how do we kill Superman, which is, I mean, one of the ways of diversity is having a simulation type game. You'd have your players worry about it. If the players have staves of wizardry and wands of fireballs and vorpal swords, and for some reason they're allowed to keep them. I mean, I'm always getting to the point where players become an army. When the players are a force to be reckoned with, NPCs who want to get stuff done would start trying to figure out ways on their own to get around the player. Instead of the universe deciding that we're going to do a diplomacy adventure right now, the NPCs would decide to be, well, let's be sneaky. I mean, obviously in a fair fight, they destroy us. Let's be sneaky. Or let's hire a bunch of idiots to go get in a stupid fight that they're going to lose while we go do something somewhere else. These are schemes people would do to fight Superman, because Superman, could do anything. So how do you make
that? Requires you to have your world set up ahead of time, and not the linear adventure where everyone's just fighting in a row.
It's where the player, but that requires that when the players are being presented with a situation, that requires the players to start thinking, maybe I shouldn't take what's being presented to me at face value. Maybe I should try, someone's manipulating me because they know I'm good at this. I need to push outside my comfort zone to get something done that I don't want to do. And that's a storytelling situation you get into, but once again, it's the opposite of fail forward. It's kind of like the idea of we got in a fight and then we won. While you were gone, the enemies unleashed the blood god and destroyed the city. But you won your fight, so congratulations, because that was actually a diversion. And that's how you would engage players, and making them think, I don't want to be played for fools. I need to engage this world, and I need to think outside my comfort. Instead of what I'm complaining about is stuff that we see in Dragon Heist, where players know they don't have to think outside their comfort zone. If we wait long enough, bad guys just come to us and we just kill
them.
Right. There was something that Griff said a minute ago that I thought was interesting, where you're talking about how when part of the, because I'm trying to parse this and figure out what the actual real core of this problem, what in all of this culture do I think is actually problematic. And I guess what it boils down to is people ruining the game for other people by saying hey, this is the right way to play, this is the optimal build. And Griff pointed out something else too, which is that once this becomes the meta, right? People don't want to explore anymore. They already have heard someone say, "Oh yes, the Phoenix sorcerer sucks," or whatever it is. Like, "Oh yeah, this thing that I thought was really cool and I thought would be fun to play turns out is not as viable as this other thing that you just told me is always going to be better." And I think that is interesting. Like, how do you combat that? For one thing, I think playing the game, like building the game around the characters that you have to play with is part of that. But we said that, again, we have to think of this in terms of like what the modules say, what the text says for these games.
Well, and I'm often complaining that the guys who write the adventures, like I don't expect them to know what your party is, but it's D&D. They know you might have a bard or a cleric of the party. They might know you have someone with a charm spell. They could at least, talk about it. But
yes, they do. They are aware you have charm, and so every villain is also immune to charm and other mind magic.
Every villain has an amulet of non. Oh my god, the amulet of non-detection. Everyone has amulet of non-detection and a mind blank all the time. So right, which once again, I guess the point of saying is we don't want the tryhards to yell at the other players. I guess I would say like the correct solution to this is to don't justify tryhardism. Like it's a toxic behavior to yell at players for exploiting the meta. By the way, you can exploit the meta and win.
Yeah.
So if we don't want players exploiting the meta and winning because we think this is bad, then we have to write around that. Or I would say the opposite situation is it's not bad. I mean, you told the players, you put a book in front of them and said, this is level 1, this is level 20. When you get to level 20, you'll be doing meteor swarms and killing 400 goblins in a single fight. We told them that was going to happen. So if you didn't expect that was going to happen, you're playing the wrong game. We need to either rewrite this game or play something different because we told them it's right there. It says it.
Yeah.
And because players, it's not random anymore, that is going to.
Yeah. And like you just said, just because players are playing well isn't a bad thing. To go back to the campaign I was talking about before, the Kingmaker one, it's technically easy for them, and so most of their encounters are pretty easy, but they feel justified in how that's going because they're supposed to be the cool heroes doing really well until that challenge finally hits them.
Yeah, and I think when we talked about rising and falling action, you have to figure out ways to rise to or lower the level of dread. That's going to be different for every party. I agree with you there. Yes. But man, we should probably do one on adventure design because I personally think,
the adventure design.
We keep repeating. We keep repeating how a good GM knows how to defeat, how to work with a bad, with the adventure. And I've got examples of good adventures that we can hold up and say, no, I think these adventures are just not written. And I think this becomes a reinforcement loop. People play, computer games like Uncharted or Mass Effect. They're taught that stories are linear. Therefore, you get to the tabletop game, stories are linear. Yeah. They're taught this.
Yeah.
And either we need to address this, that's why I said performative play. We either need to address that, yes, it is linear, the fun comes out of the performance, or we need to figure out ways to have radiance.
Right. And I think that's probably a good point to go ahead and wrap things up for this episode. Red, you have any other concluding thoughts? It's okay. It's okay. We're just talking anyway.
Yeah. No, just a whole other conversation about trap abilities. But you know what? I think this was a very
that for a topic.
Fascinating topic. Yeah, maybe for another time.
All of these will get together, weave, and make one ultimate.
Exactly. You'll have to listen to 18, 120 hours, and you'll finally understand the totality of role-playing games. Stick with us.
Remember to play the org, everybody. If you have been looking at the library shelf behind me, well, you've already missed out.
And you know what makes me a good GM? A nice soft Casper Mac.
All right. So with that, that's going to be all for this episode of Note from the Alephs. We stream bi-weekly Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can come join us live at twitch.tv/Ractus. We also stream and record weekly tabletop games at the same channel, and you can come join us when we start at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sundays and Wednesdays. Norman Rafferty here is a partner and writer for Sanguine Games. Check out sanguinegames.com and join us on the Reddit and Twitter, and look forward to the upcoming Book of Corals Ironclaw expansion book where you can engage your own pirate adventure. Don't forget to check out RedRabbit and book him for a game over on startplayinggames.com as Oracular Pig. And be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and come see us all again. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.